our series on rethinking city. And today we're looking at the union budget for this year and on how does it relate to cities. And it's a very important subject because a large amount of money are coming in the sector now. And therefore, I think, we can't really complain about money not being there, but I think, where is it coming at, and what is thank Aravind for taking this initiative. He is not an easy man to kind of find, and I have been kind of talking to him for the last 6 months or more, Aravind, to get this going, and it's happened. So thank you very much. As you know, that Habitat Forum, which is INHAF, is doing this webinar series now for the last 2 years. And this is the 84th webinar. And something like 400 experts and specialists and professionals and community groups have come and shared their views and perspectives and ideas and solutions in this particular platform. And it's been quite a learning experience. I must say that, 2 years that we've been running this. I must also tell you why we are doing this very, very briefly. I say this in all webinars, though there is some repetition, but it's very important that we share why we are doing this. This webinar series is an effort towards, or an activity towards building a wider societal partnership on the whole issue of urban challenge. And I'm going to take a few minutes and tell you why we think it's very important. The urban challenge is really very difficult. And most of the time, we don't recognize how difficult and how tough it is going to be for us. We go on saying that India, and that includes its people, its government, its professionals, we have not understood the nature of the urban challenge. And the response is quite inadequate, and that's not saying a lot. And therefore, the Indian cities are not what they should be because the response is not adequate. And evidence that they are not adequate in a response is not hard to find. Look at any aspect of our cities, and we know that they are the areas of concern and worry. And doesn't matter what you're looking at, whether you're looking at pollution, you're looking at destroyed rivers, you're looking at slums, you're looking at population explosion, you're looking at governance, you're looking at finance, you just look at anything. Fact remains that we have major problems, and we are not really, I think, in control of them. And what is important also is for us to realize that not meeting the challenge properly has a huge cost in terms of quality of life of millions of people, especially the poor and the low-income groups, and also its impact on our ambition for $5 trillion economy, because we know if cities are in need of economic growth, if we do not manage our cities well, it's going to impact on our ambition to become global power in order to become a financial sort of great. I also talk about this time and again that one of the reasons we need to do it is this, that the conventional sources, which includes government, includes professionals, which includes private sector, academic community, they do not look like producing any new ideas, any new perspectives, any new departure. And I think that new narratives are not really coming from that. And therefore, And of course, I'm not saying that nothing is happening. It's not correct because there's a lot that is happening. We have the smart city mission, we have Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, we have Swachh Bharat, and we all kind of things that's happening. But what seems to come out clearly is this, that this initiatives and efforts do not look like delivering, and they don't look like adequate in face of enormity and complexity of the urban challenge. So it is in this context that one is looking at the societal partnership. That if we really want to deal with this, it's going to require much more than what we have and what we are doing. When I was speaking, it's going to require a paradigm shift. That's how we look at issues and how we meet the challenges. And it is in that context that we are talking about for last 3 years at least, and of course running this webinar series for 2 years, that we need to build a societal partnership. We've got to involve everyone. And I believe personally very strongly, it's not only government. There are a large number of resources and skills and abilities outside the government, in the private sector, among professionals, among NGOs, among civil society, and we should really kind of bring it together. And this is a step in that direction. So having said that, I'm going to hand this over to Aravind. But before I do that, I want to make 2 small little observations. One is, of course, introduce Aravind, because, if that doesn't happen, no one will introduce Aravind. And therefore, I think, let me do that. Aravind, as a matter of, so far I'm concerned, anytime I want to do something, I have some ideas, I have someone's reference, I go on telephone Aravind Bhai, and sometimes I go in fact telephone because I wanted some money to do this with the competition. So he's someone I think one reaches out to time and again. Arvind's interest is in research in the urbanization, its intersection with poverty in cities. And he has hands-on experience in working with communities over the last 5 years in participatory planning, formulating policy recommendations.
Kirti sir, can I just come in? Are we in a practice session? Because there are people who are messaging and saying that we are not able to get in. Ujjwala, can you reconfirm, please?
Oh, Ujjwala?
I'm getting multiple messages saying that we are not able to get in.
I have got also a couple of messages. People are saying they're not able to get in.
Please see if they can join in now.
Yeah, they are joining. They're joining in now. They're joining in now. Okay. Thank you. Which is why
your number is increasing now. Yeah.
Well, why we delayed the joining?
Apologies. Yes. We were in a practice session. It has started now. People are joining in.
Lovely. Thank you.
I hope we have Kirti Bhai's introductory remarks recorded, because those are very important.
Yes. The whole thing is recorded.
Great.
I will share the entire.
Sorry, I think I'm extremely sorry. I think this is first of all, no, I have a sense of history, and I don't want to kind of not to get lost that and learned here. But anyway, so Aravind that's involved in formulating policy recommendation to people's concern related to housing and livelihood, and advocating for equitable and just cities. He aims to study the urban and the global south to understand the nuances of urbanization, policy impacts, and its intersection with marginality, with a bigger goal to evolve people-centric urban planning frameworks that are inclusive of various marginalized sections in society. It's a tremendously interesting area, and we know very well Aravind is doing very well. And I think before I hand over to Aravind, on this particular issue, I just wanted to make a small little comment, because I talk about every time I talk about this, and I remember the statistics. That World Bank went on saying that in order to kind of look after India's gap in infrastructure development, you require $640 billion over a period of 20 years. And we got to, it's a sobering thought. We know that we had something like $14 billion available for JNRM over a period of 10 years. And we were huffing and puffing and spending it. And we were essentially, I think, struggling to find that money. So if 14 billion was something which was too much for our institutional capacity and our resource base, imagine $640 billion that is required
840.
in order to look after our infrastructure. So I thought that's just a small little comment, before I hand it over to Aravind. Thank you very much, and please look forward to a very interesting session with the wonderful panel that we have today. Thank you very much, Aravind.
Thank you, Kirti sir, for the introduction and the comments to place the introduction of rethinking seminars that INHAF has been hosting for the longest time, yet doing really well and talking about very key issues that are pertaining to the urban. So really welcoming all the participants, all the attendees. There were some issues, technical issues, of course, are bound to happen. So we have all transcended that, and we have a good number of participants, and we hope as we go along, we get more engagements from the number of attendees that we have here. So this is the 84th edition of Rethinking Cities webinar, and on a very, very important topic, the topic and the issue that pertains to each and every one of us. And each and every one of us is because that it is our money, it is our budget, and our lives that are connected to the union budget that we are talking about. And we already have comments that we will keep a mix of Hindi and English for our participants' convenience. The discussions would be in English, but Pawan ji, हम हिंदी में भी इसका summary और बातचीत करेंगे, और भाषा हमारे बीच में बाधा नहीं बनेगी चर्चा के लिए. तो उस चीज से हम शुरू करते हैं. तो पहले इंग्लिश में, and I'll request all the speakers to kind of keep the Hindi-English mix, considering the participants that we have, which is mostly civil society organizations and organizations that are working on urban poor and urban poor issues. So keeping that in mind, we can, I'll just go through the introduction of why we are doing this. The title being Decoding Cities and the Union Budget. That we as Indian cities are poised at a very interesting time in history, that we are facing tremendous challenges, some that are being were mentioned by Kirti ji. The challenges that are a sort of a number-sum game, in the sense that we have these huge infrastructure gaps that have to be met. We have unimaginable levels of urban poverty that we might say that this is Amrit Kal, but the reality is that there is poverty on the ground. Third, being that the challenges that we face in the form of climate crisis, and that's visible as we speak. I'm in Delhi, the temperature is already 33, 35, and what we are seeing is something that we have never seen before. So to address all of this, we in Indian cities need to adopt a sustainable, inclusive urban development strategy, which reaches out to all its citizens and promotes efficient use of mere resources that we have. We are not very developed countries having a lot of resources. So whatever that we have, we use it effectively and well. That is the intent, which is why union budgets could be a very interesting space for us as civil society organizations to think about, engage with, work on going forward. And the sad part sometimes with the union budgets is that come every January, end last week and February first week, a lot of interest either in media or in civil society circles comes, and we debate, we discuss, we get to the big hits and misses, but we don't, I think, at least I can speak for myself and the group that we are in, that we don't engage and understand more of the whole budgeting process, and don't see, the in between of the gray and of the black and white, and not focus on the gray. So that is a challenge that we as civil society organizations have in the whole process. But going forward, this might not be very useful. This strategy also should change, and that is why we are calling for this meeting. So this panel, in that sense, aims to bring together experts from different sectors, and we have a wonderful panel. to read the union budget in a much more closer fashion, and to look at it not just from the perspective of allocations, mentions, the big budget figures, but what is really in it for the urban poor and marginal populations, what is really in it from the perspective of climate change, crisis and adaptation strategies that are required, not in future, not in 2047, required now. So what foothold does the union budget give us going forward? And lastly, to close, that this is done with also an intention of not just a debate and discussion, but also the attendees sharing their perspective, ideas. Nakul has engaged, Kansa has engaged with the budget process, so we would be very interested to know how do we engage with the process, keeping in mind that, of course, when we are talking about 45 lakh crore and 1 year of India's budget, that we have a stake in the process, we have a claim to the budget, and of course, this is our money that we are talking about. So how we effectively use our money and the little resources that we have for a better development. अगर इसका मैं हिंदी में समरी करूं कि बजट हमारे लिए बहुत जरूरी है, ये हमारा पैसा है और बहुत बड़े आंकड़े की बात होती है, और हम इसके साथ कहते हैं कि जनवरी के आखिरी हफ्ते में और फरवरी के महीने में इसके ऊपर बात होती है, फिर एक साल बाद बात होती है कि भाई हमने बजट में ये रखा था, ये नहीं रखा था, ये फिगर है, ये है, पर बीच में इसका कोई एंगेजमेंट नहीं होता। तो सिविल सोसाइटी या सामाजिक संगठन होने के नाते हम इसके साथ थोड़े और अच्छे तरीके से कैसे बातचीत कर सकते हैं, इसको अच्छे से और कैसे समझ सकते हैं, ताकि इसमें जो बदलाव करने हैं वो हम कर पाए, उसकी एक छोटी सी शुरुआत है। बहुत साथी अलग अलग तरीके से कर रहे हैं, वो हम जानने की कोशिश करेंगे। इसमें ऐसे भी सवाल हैं कि यूनियन बजट रेलेवेंट है क्या सिटीज के लिए, ऐसे भी साथी थे जो सवाल कर रहे थे, क्योंकि हमको तो शायद सिटी बजट पे काम करना चाहिए, वो भी हम डिस्कशन पे आगे कर सकते हैं। पर हमारा फंडामेंटल कहते हैं ना कि फलसफा हमारा इसमें ये है कि देखिए हमारा पैसा इसमें लग रहा है, तो हमको पता होना चाहिए कि हमारे शहरों में कैसे काम आएगा या नहीं आएगा, इसमें हमारा हक है, इसमें हमारा अधिकार है। इस पर्सपेक्टिव से हम बजट जो यूनियन बजट बना है 45 लाख करोड़ का, इसको हम देख रहे हैं, क्योंकि हमारे शहरों में बहुत चीजों की कमी है, बहुत चीजों की जरूरत है। और जैसे कि मैं दिल्ली में बैठा और हमारे साथी जो उत्तर भारत में बैठे हैं उनको पता होगा कि भाई यहाँ पर अभी 35 डिग्री टेम्परेचर हो गया है, जो बचपन में हम कभी स्वेटर पहना करते थे, तो अभी हमको फैन चलाने की नौबत आ गई है फरवरी के महीने में। तो ये सच्चाई है, दिस इज व्हाट वी आर डीलिंग विद, एंड फॉर विच वी हैव अ वंडरफुल पैनल, और मैं पैनल को वेलकम करता हूँ। यहाँ पे हमारे बीच में गौरव हैं, सेंटर फॉर फाइनेंशियल अकाउंटेबिलिटी से, एंड गौरव विल टॉक अबाउट द मैक्रो structures of the union budget. He has extensive work on financial policies and smart cities. You have done a wonderful sort of analysis, which will help us in decoding the budget better. We have Tikender Panwar ji, who's been the ex-deputy mayor of Shimla, and he's an urban expert, he's an author, he's a constant critic of the state and the policies that the state employs. We have Nakul Sharma, who's from Climate Action Network South Asia. Climate Action South Asia ने बहुत अच्छा काम किया है कि वो बजट के साथ इस दफा शायद एंगेज भी किए हैं, तो वो भी हमारे बीच में शेयर करेंगे कि ये एंगेजमेंट कैसा रहा। हमारे बीच we also have Nandita, who has joined us from TIS Mumbai. She's an expert working with the informal sector workers with an extensive experience of working with fish workers, with marginal women workers in Mumbai and around. So a warm welcome to Gaurav, Tikender, Nakul and Nandita, and looking forward to a wonderful discussion and interesting set of ideas so that we can think of how do we take this forward. So to begin with, I will request Gaurav to everyone gets 10 minutes, और प्लीज ध्यान रखिएगा कि इंग्लिश में आप करिए, बट एक ठोस उसका समरी रूप जो है हिंदी में करेंगे तो हमारे पार्टिसिपेंट्स के लिए भी फायदा होगा। नॉट प्रमोटिंग हिंदी इन एनी वे, प्लीज डोंट गेट मी रॉन्ग, आई एम फ्रॉम द साउथ, आई एम फ्रॉम केरला एंड आई वुड नॉट डू दैट, सो जस्ट स्टेटिंग दैट अप फ्रंट, बट फॉर द सेक ऑफ ऑडियंस दैट वी हैव। थैंक यू। Gaurav, over to you.
Thanks. Thank you, Aravind, for this opportunity. I think this is very important to have this discussion, especially in the context that you said about the budget and the money that we are investing. And of course, also important from the point of view that in the past 3-4 years, we've been looking at a huge number of investments, especially the capital investments into infrastructure, from smart cities to ports and many other things. So in that sense, it's an important discussion to have, and at this time of the year. To begin with, as you said, let's have a quick look and in terms of the numbers, and then see what exactly are we seeing in terms of what the budget has given us as policy directions. So if we look at, especially in the urban context, if we look at the FY 23-24 budget, probably it would be good to focus on Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and start from there, what exactly it means in terms of the urban sector. So if we quickly look at what are the numbers that we have. So for FY 22-23, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs had a budgetary allocation of around 500,000 crores. And the capex, capital expenditure component was around 27,300 crores. In 23-24, almost similar budgetary allocation we are looking at. It's around 76,400 crores. And capital expenditure is around 26,000 crores. Specifically within the ministry, if you look at some of the specific schemes and programs that the central government has. So for example, the Smart Cities Mission and the Amrit, which is the Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation, has around 16,000 crores in this year's budget as an allocation. In FY 22-23, it was around 14,000 crores. Interestingly, this includes money allocated for a French scheme, which is called City Investments to Innovate, Integrate, and Sustain. So money is also there for this kind of a scheme integrated into the MO, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs budgetary allocation. Similarly, if we look into the Swachh Bharat mission, so in 22-23, it was around 2,300 crores. The revised estimate was around 2,000 crores. This year, the budgetary allocation is around 5,000 crores. Very interesting to note that within the urban infrastructure projects and also the kind of capital outlay that we are seeing, a big chunk is going towards the metro projects. So in 22-23, the capital outlay for metro projects was around 24,000 crores. In 23-24, the capital outlay is similar, 23,000 crores. So a big chunk is going to these metro projects. We can talk a lot about the efficacy of these metro projects at a later point. I don't think we have time for that, but this is an important thing that we need to note. Also, in addition to that, we need to also note that within this whole budgetary exercise, a lot of money is also coming within the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. A lot of money is also coming from something called IEBR, which is internal and extra budgetary resources. So the IEBR is also playing an important role in bringing funds for capital expenses. So in this FY, around 23,000 crores is from for capital expenses is from budgetary allocations, and around 17,000 crores is coming from the internal and extra budgetary resources. This includes funds that are coming from National Capital Regional Planning Board. A big chunk is coming from Housing and Urban Development Corporation and some of the other metro and BRTS projects. We'll take a moment to reflect on what Kirtiji said, and putting these numbers in the context of what the World Bank has estimated about what India's cities require as capital investments in urban infrastructure and municipal services. So the World Bank estimates around $840 billion to be invested in till 2036 in Indian cities. And this is equivalent to around 1.8% of estimated GDP that we have. The bank estimates also that half of these investments, around 450 billion, will go to basic municipal services, water supply, sewerage, solid waste management, road, street lighting. But on the other hand, the remaining $300 billion, it estimates will go for mass transit and transport projects. It says that the current levels of investment are pretty low and they need to be increased. The total capital expenditure in urban infrastructure is averaged around 0.6% of GDP in 21 to 2018 period. While most of the investment has been in basic municipal services. But over a period of time, investments in metro rail infrastructure has seen a very strong growth. So these are some of the numbers that I wanted to talk about. We can talk more about the other numbers that are there at a later point. The other important thing that I'm drawing from the budgetary speech, and it is important to add to this discussion, is we need to look beyond the numbers about the policy directions that the budget is showing. So if you look at the budget speech and the budget document, in the urban context, will frequently come around concepts like sustainable cities, efficient use of land resources, adequate resources for urban infrastructure, transit-oriented development, things like that. Also mentioning property tax governance reforms, ring fencing of user charges on urban infrastructure, cities to be incentivized to improve creditworthiness for something called municipal bonds, which has been a bit of a focus in this kind of this year's budget. Also, the budget focused on something called Urban Infrastructure Development Fund that needs to be created to develop urban infrastructure in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. And it said that the states will be encouraged to leverage resources from the grants of 15th Finance Commission to adopt appropriate user charges while accessing UIDF. And there's an allocation of around 10,000 crores per annum for this purpose. To make the other point, it's very interesting to note that just before the budget was released in in November, we had a report from the RBI on municipal financing, and then later we had a report from the World Bank, which has quoted these numbers on urban infrastructure. Almost all three of them, it's very interesting to note, kind of talk about similar concepts and changes that are needed in the Indian scenario. So user charges, ring fencing, municipal bonds, market borrowings, municipal creditworthiness, governance reform. Some of these are the highlights of all three of these events that happened in the past. Finally, I think we need to see that financing urban infrastructure, looking at budget, the extra budgetary resources, both the RBI report and the World Bank report are giving a direction, a policy direction and recommendation to use something called innovative financing to build and develop urban infrastructure and deliver urban public services. So market borrowings, again, municipal bonds and pooled financing feature a lot in these municipal finance, innovative financing terms. Though the percentage of financing mechanism in municipal budgets is pretty low of these innovative financing, but the efforts are being made to increase the percentage of these. To to make the final point that these are not the kind of very innovative solutions, because I think more than a decade has been passed when some of these solutions were started implementing in many of the municipal bodies in India, in Ahmedabad, in Bangalore, in Nagpur, in Indore, in several other places. To add to it without much success. So need to see how far this goes. And the final point that I want to make is that in this era, we also need to see what is happening beyond the budget. So many of the major announcements that this government makes doesn't happen when it presents the budget. So the national infrastructure pipeline, the smart cities mission, the monetization pipeline, everything has happened, and which has huge implications for the infrastructure sector in this country, has happened beyond the budget. It didn't happen when the budget was announced. So we also need to keep that in context in the present era and the regime that we are living in. So these are my initial comments in this whole discussion. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take questions and comments. Thank you.
Gaurav, we'll take the questions and comments little later. Do you want to like give 1 minute or less than a 1 minute summary in Hindi? Please.
Hindi?
जी 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 कर देंगे, अच्छा रहेगा.
ठीक है. तो जो मैंने कहा पिछले 5-7 मिनट में, उसमें ये कि जो मोटे मोटे पॉइंट्स थे हमारे हिंदी के सुनने वाले लोगों के लिए, कि जो बजट रखा गया है ये शहरी और गरीब मंत्रालय के लिए, वो उसमें लगभग समानता है जितना पिछले फाइनेंशियल ईयर में थी और इस फाइनेंशियल ईयर में. तो पिछले फाइनेंशियल ईयर में 76,000 करोड़ के करीब था. इस वित्तीय साल में भी उन्होंने 76,000 करोड़ के आसपास ही रखा है. और दूसरी चीज ये कि जो विभिन्न केंद्र सरकार की जो योजनाएं हैं इस मंत्रालय के तहत, उसमें भी लगभग समान उन्होंने वित्तीय आंकड़े रखे हैं. जैसे स्मार्ट सिटीज के लिए और अमृत के लिए उन्होंने 16,000 करोड़ रखे हैं इस बार. पिछली बार वो 14,000 करोड़ थे. स्वच्छ भारत मिशन के लिए पिछली बार 2,000 करोड़ थे, इस बार 5,000 करोड़ के कुछ करीब रखे हुए. और जो एक उसमें महत्वपूर्ण बात ये थी कि काफी सारा एक बड़ा पैसा जो है वो मेट्रो जो परियोजनाएं बन रही हैं अलग अलग शहरों में, उनके उसमें जा रहा है. और ये जो आंकड़े हैं और ये जो इस तरीके के पूरे जो निवेश की जो पूरी बात चल रही है, निवेश बढ़ाने की शहरी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में, उसमें काफी समानता दिखती है. जो मैं कह रहा था कि विश्व बैंक ने जिस तरीके के आंकड़े प्रस्तुत किए हैं $840 बिलियन के 2036 तक, जो भारत के शहरों में जो निवेश की संभावनाएं हैं, उनसे ये काफी मिलते जुलते हैं. और इसी तरीके की एक रिपोर्ट रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया ने भी निकाली थी, वो भी इसी तरीके की कुछ बात कह रहे हैं. और इसमें एक बात जो मैं ये कह रहा था कि ये इन आंकड़ों को हमें जो पूरी रिफॉर्म या सुधार की जो परियोजनाएं हैं या सुधार की जो बात है उसके साथ जोड़ के देखना चाहिए. उसमें कैसे वो जो जमीन उपलब्ध है शहरी क्षेत्रों में उसका बेहतर इस्तेमाल कर सकें, शहरी जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है उसको कैसे बेहतर बना सकें, उससे किस तरीके से वो लोगों से पैसा वसूल कर सकें जो उसको इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं. और जो म्युनिसिपल संस्थाएं हैं उनकी कैसे वो वित्तीय क्षमताएं बढ़ा सकें. इस तरीके के रिफॉर्म्स की काफी बात है. और एक जो आखिरी बात मैं कह रहा था वो महत्वपूर्ण की जो नए तरीके के जो निवेश के जो तरीके हैं उसको वो खोजने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. वैसे ये कई सालों से हो रहा है, लेकिन म्युनिसिपल बॉन्ड, प्राइवेट सेक्टर पार्टिसिपेशन, पीपीपी, इस तरीके की योजनाओं को लाके नए तरीके से अर्बन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में पैसा लाने की एक मुहिम वो छेड़ रहे हैं, जो कई साल पुरानी भी है, उसको वो नया बोल रहे हैं. लेकिन इस तरीके की नई चर्चाएं भी बजट में आई हैं और विश्व बैंक और आरबीआई की रिपोर्ट्स में भी ये सामने आया. तो मोटा मोटा ये जो मैंने कहा वो नहीं. थैंक यू.
Shukriya, Gaurav. Thank you, Gaurav, for the overall figures. Now I will request Tikender ji to speak from a perspective of urban policy, governance, and inclusion of urban poor, and also to kind of get out of, possibly also get out of the Ministry of Housing Urban Affair bracket, because there would be other allocations that can have a huge impact in or on the cities. So Tikender, you would want to talk about them as well?
Thanks, Aravind. I hope I'm audible there. Great. Thanks, Gaurav. I think Gaurav has done my work very easy, and so I don't have to go into. So I don't have to explain the budget from the city's perspective, what the budget has not done. In fact, that's what probably I'll try to address upon. But before jumping to that, there's something very interesting. I wrote an article. I thought it will be published by now, so I could have shared that link. And it's on, the whole question of splintering urbanism. And I'll just try to contextualize it. And why I'm saying so, and that will be on the Shimla water utility, how it's being privatized. And this eventually is kind of my practice session article for a book that's going to come up on the Shimla water story. So when I was trying to understand this whole concept of the paradigm shift, which Kirti Bhai was also mentioning, in the previous budget also we saw Nirmala Sitharamanji saying that we require a paradigm shift, and this is not the sustainable way of urbanization. But we saw it's a different. I mean, there's no paradigm shift that has happened in the current budget. It's a kind of continuation of the budgets that we've seen since last many decades. Now, what is this actually? So let me just try to figure it out. And what I call splintering urbanism is, these cities have tremendously suffered from a fragmentation. I mean, it's a kind of, and how, the large capital intensive technologies driven budgets are being ordained. I mean, I just try to build that argument. So they have suffered from fragmentation of access, control, and pricing of network infrastructure, including, of course, water supply and whatnot. Now, this fragmentation in the cities is due to the certain political economic processes, which I call neoliberalism, the process that began in 1990s, and that have changed the ways cities are governed and services are being provided. Now, why are cities splintering? They are splintering because of certain macroeconomic and political trends that we have witnessed, what Gaurav was also mentioning, such as high levels of debts. I mean, the debts, of the cities and of the state governments that reduce their fiscal capacity, even to bargain. I mean, so they hardly have any capacity to provide and extend government services. And these trends create ideal conditions for what I call vulture capitalists, in the cities, that they have entered in varied forms. Of course, private water companies and whatnot, to aggressively seek out new markets. Now, if you see the direction of this budget, from mobility, as Gaurav was pointing out, it's more push for capital intensive. 30% of the budget, total budget that I could calculate, Gaurav, please correct me if I'm wrong, 30% of the total budget, urban budget, goes for metro. Is that the direction that we are heading for? So I think these are serious issues. I mean, and this policy paradigm continues to plague, what I call the poverty of philosophy of understanding the urban spectrum. So this continues to plague and in fact guides our system. The inability, the incapacity of the cities, even the states, and then bringing in those large capital intensive technologies as if. And that's what Gaurav was also mentioning, because I've done three, the RBI, the World Bank. I mean, I've written extensively on both these reports, and all these reports suggest that, there has to be a push for private capital to enter to the cities, despite the fact that the World Bank itself mentions in that report that 84% of the total urban infrastructure that has developed in the last 3 decades has happened because of the intervention from central and state governments. Now, let me come specifically to the budget, Aravind, because I thought this, मैं ये थोड़ा सा बताना इसलिए चाह रहा था कि ये जो पूरा बदलाव हो रहा है शहरों में, ये बदलाव आज से नहीं है, पहले से है, और ये शहरों को निजी पूंजी के हवाले से और निजी पूंजी को इस्तेमाल से हमारे शहरों में समस्याएं खत्म हो जाएंगी। हम देखा ये शहरों की समस्या उस तरह से खत्म नहीं है और ये बजट में भी वही डायरेक्शन है। एक तो ये जो इस बजट में बहुत कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर की बात कही गई कि एक बार कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर हो जाएगा तो उससे ट्रिकल डाउन इफेक्ट होगा और उससे बहुत अर्बन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बनेगा। तो हम देखते हैं कोई बहुत ज्यादा नहीं है। अगर आप दो यूपीए का पीरियड देखें 2009 से 2014, उस वक्त भी ये 15% ऑफ जीडीपी था और आज ये 14.9% ऑफ जीडीपी है। तो बहुत ज्यादा बदलाव हम इसमें नहीं देख रहे हैं जो पुराने जमाने से था। और अर्बन में तो फिगर्स वही है जैसा गौरव ने कहा, लेकिन अगर परसेंटेज ऑफ जीडीपी हम देखेंगे तो ये गिर गया है। ये अर्बन में पहले 0.5% था पिछली बार और इस बार ये 0.3% है। तो ये इनफैक्ट और गिरा है। हम इसको समझ सकते हैं इसका मतलब क्या है। और ऑफ कोर्स बजटरी प्रपोजल जो फिगर्स है वो गौरव ने दी है, मैं नहीं समझता इसमें। और ये भी कहा है कि 30% इसमें जो 30.32% सिर्फ मेट्रो कंस्ट्रक्शन में है, जबकि शहरों को पता भी नहीं। मैं आपको एक मजाक में बताना चाहता हूँ और मुझे बता देना टाइम कितना है मेरे पास। So just remind me because when I have 3 minutes left because or maybe 4 minutes left. Okay.
Sure.
So मैं कोची के म्युनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन में था गया हुआ और कोची में उस जमाने में यूडीएफ, आप अच्छी तरह से जानते हो केरला को, तो मैं पुश बताना चाह रहा हूँ आपको। और ये मैं जमाने ये 2 की जमाने की बात कर रहा हूँ। तो अभी जो करंट कोची का मेयर है उस जमाने में काउंसलर था। उस समय में यूडीएफ मतलब कांग्रेस द्वारा शासित वो कॉर्पोरेशन थी। तो एक पूरा डेलीगेशन गया जिसमें जो करंट मेयर है जो कि एलडीएफ का है, वो भी साथ में जयपाल रेड्डी जो कि मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ हाउसिंग अर्बन अफेयर्स थे, उनसे मिलने गए। तो सबने डिमांड किया कि हमें भी चाहिए, इंक्लूडिंग द एलडीएफ काउंसिलर। दिस इज व्हाट द मेयर टोल्ड मी व्हेन आई वाज इन कोची रिसेंटली कि हमें मेट्रो चाहिए। तो जयपाल रेड्डी ने जानते क्या बोला उस जमाने में? उसने बोला शर्म आनी चाहिए, मेरे पार्टी के लोग तो मांगे मेट्रो में मान सकता हूं, लेकिन आप तो मजदूरों की पार्टी के लोग हो, आपको तो मोबिलिटी की बात करनी चाहिए, बस इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की बात करनी चाहिए। एंड दिस इज व्हाट ही हैज बीन ओपनली सेइंग, यू नो। सो लेकिन हम देखते हैं ट्रेंड आज ये पूरा डोमिनेट कर रहा है। हर जगह पे मेट्रो पे कोई मुनाफा आप देखते नहीं हो, मतलब मुनाफे का तो छोड़िए आप, और पूरा जो क्रॉस सब्सिडाइज आम आदमी की जेब से। तो ये जो पैसा लगना चाहिए मोबिलिटी पर, मतलब पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट पे, उस पे फोकस ना करते हुए, ऑफ कोर्स मेट्रो भी पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट का हिस्सा है, लेकिन इतना लार्ज कैपिटल इंटेंसिव है जिस वजह से आज आप देख सकते हो कि ज्यादा पुश है, क्योंकि वो पूरा पॉलिसी पैराडाइम उस तरह से इसको बांधा हुआ है। और इसी तरह सोशल हाउसिंग पे कहा है कि किस तरह से 60,000 करोड़ के आसपास 59,963 करोड़ से गिरकर आज ये 2021-22 में ये 23,103 करोड़ के आसपास रह गया है। तो कितना ये जो 2 करोड़ घर की बात थी, स्मार्ट सिटीज मिशन और अमृत भी गौरव ने कहा है, हालांकि स्मार्ट सिटीज पे 800 करोड़ और गिरा है। और ये जो लाइट हाउसेज हम देखते थे, वो लाइट हाउसेज the lighthouses were kind of flagship program of this government. लाइट हाउसेज होता है बंदरगाह पे जो लाइट हाउस शिप को जगह देता, वो लाइट हाउस बुझ गए, अब चमचमा नहीं रहे हैं। तो मतलब, और आपकी रिपोर्ट में देख रहा हूँ ये गौरव, मतलब सीएफए की, आप देख सकते, पढ़ रहा हूँ 7 years ऑफ स्मार्ट सिटीज मिशन इन इंडिया। तो मतलब, और सस्टेनेबिलिटी क्या है अगर आप इनके प्रोग्राम में मतलब इस बार देखेंगे, सस्टेनेबिलिटी, ट्रांजिट ओरिएंटेड डेवलपमेंट। अब मुझे लगता है अरविंद थोड़ा इसके लिए एक अलग से वेबिनार चाहिए कि टीओडी क्या होता है भाई। टीओडी मिडिल क्लास फेनोमेनन है हिंदुस्तान में, जहां पर आपके पास माइग्रेंट वर्कर 28 करोड़ रजिस्टर्ड है, वो टीओडी में रहेंगे। उनके पास तो मतलब लेबर हॉस्टल चाहिए ना, तो इस बजट में लेबर हॉस्टल बिल्कुल गायब है। तो सस्टेनेबिलिटी का मतलब क्या है? टीओडी, ट्रांजिट ओरिएंटेड डेवलपमेंट। सस्टेनेबिलिटी का मतलब क्या है? म्युनिसिपल बॉन्ड्स। अरे म्युनिसिपल बॉन्ड कौन खरीदेगा? आज अदानी के बॉन्ड नहीं कोई खरीद रहा है, मतलब उसकी बैंड बज गई है। आप बोल रहे हैं कि म्युनिसिपल बॉन्ड बनाओ, म्युनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन। शिमला जैसा म्युनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन बनाएगा, मैं भी नहीं खरीदूंगा उसके बॉन्ड। आप बताएं कौन खरीदेगा? हालत देखिए आप क्या है। तो मतलब फिजूल का एक, मतलब अलग से बात करना जो कि मतलब बिल्कुल भी ग्रास रूट नहीं है, बिल्कुल भी रूटेड नहीं है, उस तरह से हो रहा है। और सबसे बड़ी बात है एनहांस अवेलेबिलिटी ऑफ अर्बन लैंड। कोई बदलाव नहीं है साहब जो 90 से शुरू हो रहा है, जो मतलब ये जो चार्ल्स कोरिया के जमाने में, हालांकि वो अर्बन कमीशन की बहुत कमाल का काम था, लेकिन ये डेफिनेशन वहीं से आती है, इंजन्स ऑफ ग्रोथ के नाम से। ये वो सिटीज आज भी इंजन्स ऑफ ग्रोथ के, हालांकि कीर्ति भाई वहां है आज हमारे पास उस कमीशन के मेंबर तो मतलब जस्ट टू, इट्स नॉट अ प्रोवोकेशन फॉर कीर्ति भाई, लेकिन मतलब ये है कि ये आप क्या इंजन्स ऑफ ग्रोथ की बात कर रहे हो? तो अर्बन लैंड की अवेलेबिलिटी, आप मतलब उसका मतलब क्या है? आप समझिए अरविंद के जितना गरीब है उसको किनारे करोगे आप वहां, और वहीं पर आप उसको अर्बन लैंड को अवेलेबल करने की कोशिश करोगे, या लैंड यूज चेंज करोगे ना आप। मतलब ऑलरेडी जो आज क्लाइमेट का इम्पैक्ट है आपको, तो और एफिशिएंट लैंड यूज,
Tikender ji, you will have now 3 minutes.
Okay,
to
fine.
make,
3 minutes are more than enough. So there's no mention of urban employment. This year was screaming about massive unemployment that we have witnessed in the country. So at least some urban employment guarantee act. There's already a private members bill pending in the Rajya Sabha. I mean, it's a commendable work from one of the member of parliament there, but there's no mention of urban employment. So it all happens that there will be a trickle down effect. You have capital intensive capital investment, and that's how the cities are. This is, we've seen this does not happen. ऐसा होता नहीं है, तो उसका कोई सवाल ही नहीं है। माइग्रेंट्स के बारे में एक शब्द तक नहीं है पूरे बजट में, अगर मैं मिस ना किया हूं कहीं, खासकर अर्बन के चैप्टर में तो कहीं भी नहीं है। माइग्रेंट इतना बड़ा कुछ 28 करोड़ आपका अभी रजिस्टर हो गया है जो ई श्रम पोर्टल पर है। हाउसिंग पे वैसे ही गिर गया है, और ये हाउसिंग तो पुराना जमाना हो गया साहब, ये जो हाउसिंग बनाने का। आज लेबर के लिए अगर जो माइग्रेंट लेबर है उनको रेंटल हाउसिंग चाहिए, उनको लेबर हॉस्टल चाहिए। सो दिस शुड हैव बीन अ न्यू पैराडाइम शिफ्ट, वेयर यू कुड हैव फोकस, लेकिन ये कोई सवाल ही नहीं है इसमें। और फिर इसी तरह से जो पोल्यूशन का सवाल होना चाहिए था, आज वी हैव वन ऑफ द हाईएस्ट नंबर ऑफ पोल्यूटेड cities in the world, पर वो पोल्यूशन सिर्फ आप आइसोलेशन में नहीं कर सकते, जैसे दिल्ली में कर रहे हैं कि एक वो गन लगा दो और उससे पानी फेंक दो। वो पोल्यूशन नहीं है साहब, एक्चुअली मोबिलिटी के साथ उसका लिंक्ड है, क्योंकि 60% पोल्यूशन 70% पोल्यूशन आपका जो है वो रोड के साथ है और कंस्ट्रक्शन के साथ है। एनीवे, तो सवाल ये था कि ये जो एड्रेस होना चाहिए था। और एक सवाल आपके मैं देख रहा था ट्विटर पर आया था कि क्या इसका कुछ मतलब भी है, इससे पहले के सवाल पर आए, जो आप इतना अर्बन डिस्कस कर रहे हो, शहरों में मतलब है साहब, ये थोड़ा समझने की जरूरत है, क्योंकि ये पॉलिसी निर्देश है, जैसा आरबीआई का, जैसे वर्ल्ड बैंक का, ये पूरा पॉलिसी देता है। ये बेचारे उस पुअर शहर को, जिसको पता भी नहीं है कि मेरे सिर के ऊपर ओले पड़ रहे हैं, और वो ओले के ऊपर वो उसको सिर्फ बोल रहे हैं कि आप उसको उस ओले पड़ने के लिए, ओला पता नहीं बहुत लोग समझते कि नहीं, इट्स अ काइंड ऑफ हेल। तो ये जो हेल स्टॉर्म हो रहा है, ये हेल स्टॉर्म कोई और तय कर रहा है साहब, और वो दिल्ली से ही हेल स्टॉर्म तय हो रहा है। इनफैक्ट दिल्ली के भी बहुत सारा बाहर से, एंड द सिटीज आर नॉट इवन बीइंग प्रिपेयर्ड, दे आर नॉट इवन बीइंग part and parcel. What about urban governance? There's no mention about urban governance. कि किस तरह से उसको और strengthen होना चाहिए. Of course, it shouldn't have been a part of the budget, but at least some policy direction should have been there, strengthening urban governance. Because if you ask me, and this is what K.C. Sivaramakrishnan and I, we've been saying, let's part off 10% of the, central budget straight away to the cities. I mean, just see the difference. I mean, that's what we've seen in the People's Plan in Kerala. Let's try to think out of the box. And this is what K.T. Ravindran said in, when I had my book launch, that we require out of the box thinking. And this is not my word. These are not my words. This is what K.T. informed us. And you were there, Aravind, by the way. Kerala is thinking out of the box. They're saying, man, you don't want industries in the cities. We are not an industry-driven city. I mean, so there's some new thinking. So we'll have to go back to some of the ways. I don't know what their innovative ways would be. So the point is कि शहर को टिकाना है, टिकाना तो आप छोड़ दीजिए, शहर को अगर फिलहाल बचाना भी है तो उसके लिए बिल्कुल अलग चाहिए, जिसमें लोगों की भागीदारी चाहिए। ये जो ऊपर से थोप कर और फिर उसको पॉलिसी में करना है, डेवलपमेंट पॉलिसी लोन के हिसाब से उसको बांधना है, ये बहुत डेंजरस है, हम देख रहे हैं, और ये आने वाले टाइम में बहुत सिविक अनरेस्ट पैदा करने वाला है। आई थिंक विद दैट आई लर्न। थैंक यू।
Thank you, Tikender ji, and we'll come back to you on the many points that you've mentioned. मेरा रिक्वेस्ट है कि एक आध सवाल आए हैं क्वेश्चन आंसर में। रहमत इज आस्किंग अबाउट ओवर सब्सक्रिप्शन ऑफ municipal bonds, that green bonds that happened in Indore. So if someone wants to take that question, NB Mazumdar has commented that planning should be sustainable and it should involve people. We'll ask of how that could be done. I mean, Tikender ji has shared a example of People's Plan that is very popular and has really worked very well, at least in decentralizing planning provisions to different levels. So that's welcomed, and very interesting comment. And a small thing that I remember, Shamla ji has commented कि metro में travel करना possible नहीं है। तो मैंने ऐसे शहर हमने देखे हैं, ऐसे शहर जहां पर मेट्रो को बर्थडे पार्टीज के लिए आप बुक कर सकते हैं। ऐसी हालत हो गई है जहां पर आपने लाखों करोड़ों पैसे लगाए हैं, तो वहां पर आप बर्थडे पार्टी के लिए मेट्रो बुक कर सकते हैं। That is a reality, and that is the question that we are asking, whether is that the correct sort of resource allocation that has happened? Do all the cities require it? Those are the questions that we would want to kind of delve more on and see what could be done. Next, we have on the question of sustainability, I think what we are saying is different from what is being allocated. So why union budgets or budgets are really important is do we have allocations for the promises that we are making? So now I will request Nakul to talk about climate adaptation and resilience and net zero ideas that we have or we claim to have moved in that direction. Are we having sufficient financial allocations? What are the good steps that have been taken? And also to share from your side, Nakul, especially from a Kansa perspective, because you have engaged in the process, you have reached out. So it will really help other folks to also do the same in their fields. So over to Nakul. I'll share a PPT that Nakul has presented.
Aravind, if that's okay, can I share the PPT? I've made some iterations or changes.
Absolutely, please. आपके लिए पर end में please आप हिंदी में summarize जरूर कर दीजिएगा.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल.
जी, आपके पास 10 मिनट है नकुल.
Sure.
Thank
you, Aravind. I think you can see the PPT.
Slide show पे कर दीजिए please. अच्छा रहेगा.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I'm really sorry, my throat is not working well. I am very happy to be speaking just after Tikender ji and Gaurav sir, who have given a not only a broad view but a detailed view of what is happening in actuality, how allocations are being made, how things have been moving on the budgetary front, especially in relation to cities and the overall things that should be done in a certain way are not being done. So I'll stick to the topic, and at the end of it, I'll also try to summarize the main issues related to climate resilience, social justice, and how climate change has been a persistent problem, and more so on the global negotiations and global dialogue perspective. Especially on cities perspective, this has just now starting, the realization is starting that this problem needs much more seriousness than we have been attributing to it. So I'll just quickly go through couple of slides that I have made to bring the context and to build up a perspective for our participants for refreshing their memories. So I think we all know that global populations, I mean, of course, population is tend to rise, but global population which are living in cities is going to rise. And when it comes to there are some basic projections that right now when I am speaking, there are around 55 to 56% of population across the globe on an average which is living in cities. It is tend to increase around 68 to 72% by 2050, average global population living in urban cities. But the number is slightly different by different research organizations. The attribution is different. Asia is going to, as we say, Asia, it's the 21st century is the century for Asian growth. It should not be exaggeration to say it is because of the growth in cities and the overall migration due to any reasons related to economic migration, push factor, or also related to push factors which are due to assets being lost due to disasters, due to climate-induced disasters, so on and so forth. So Asian century, and especially cities in Asia, are going to see a massive growth of cities and population in our region. Around the, as we have said, that around the world itself.
नकुल, मैं एक रिक्वेस्ट करूं, क्योंकि स्लाइड आपका अंग्रेजी में है, तो आप हिंदी में बोल सकते हैं एक्चुअली.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल
जी.
Thank you, Aravind. I think I'll try to also make and try to also connect it. So for हमारे हिंदी के श्रोताओं के लिए अगर थोड़ा शब्द इधर उधर हो वोकैबुलरी में, क्योंकि थोड़ा सा कुछ वर्ड्स ऐसे होते हैं, तो प्लीज मुझे बता दीजिएगा. I'll try to make the corrections. हम सब ये जानते हैं कि सिटीज जो हैं, जो हमारा पुराना इकोनॉमिक मॉडल है, तिकेंदर जी ने भी यही बताया था, अभी बोल रहे थे कि जो हमारा पुराना इकोनॉमिक मॉडल है, सिटीज आर द इंजन्स ऑफ ग्रोथ. और सिटीज की इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ग्रोथ की वजह से सिटीज को मोस्ट रिसोर्सेज एलोकेट किया जाता है। उसमें भी बाइफर्केशन है, अलग अलग वेरिएशंस हैं। टायर 1 सिटीज को कितना एलोकेट किया जाता है, टायर 2 सिटीज को कितना एलोकेट किया जाता है। उस एलोकेशन के हिसाब से सिटीज से ही जीडीपी जनरेशन भी होता है, इकोनॉमिक वैल्यू जनरेशन भी सिटीज के थ्रू ही होता है। बट एट द सेम टाइम हमारी सिटीज जो हैं वो पिछले कुछ दशकों से और हम ये कह सकते हैं सेंचुरी से ये प्रॉब्लम चलते आ रही है। जलवायु परिवर्तन की जो प्रॉब्लम है वो हमारी सिटीज को इम्प्रोपोर्शनेटली और डिस्प्रोपोर्शनेटली ऑन ए हायर स्केल इफेक्ट कर रही है। इसके बहुत सारे रीजन है और कारण है। फ्लड्स, द फ्रीक्वेंसी ऑफ फ्लड्स, मैं एग्जांपल देना चाहूंगा। चेन्नई का फ्लड था जो कि नॉट यूजुअल, बहुत यूजुअल केस नहीं है चेन्नई में फ्लड्स होना। केरला में फ्लड्स, अरविंद आप केरला से आते हैं, कुछ 100 साल में केरला ने उस तरह का, उस स्केल का फ्लड देखा था जो हमने आई थिंक 2016-17 में देखा था। मुंबई के फ्लड्स बहुत नॉर्मल हो गए हैं। 2010-2005 से पहले मुंबई में फ्लड्स और फ्लड्स जो अर्बन इनंडेशंस की जो फ्रीक्वेंसी थी वो बहुत कम थी। एक और एग्जांपल मैं देना चाहूंगा अर्बन पर्सपेक्टिव से और कोस्टल सिटीज पर्सपेक्टिव से, क्लाइमेट चेंज से रिलेटेड। हम जितने भी हमारे श्रोता है वो हम लोगों ने हमेशा समाचार में और न्यूज में देखा है कि जितने भी साइक्लोन्स साउथ एशिया में या फिर इंडियन सब कॉन्टिनेंट में आते हैं, वो मोस्ट ऑफ द साइक्लोन्स हमारे बे ऑफ बंगाल से राइज होते हैं, क्योंकि बे ऑफ बंगाल कंपेयर टू अरेबियन सी और इंडियन ओशन बहुत शैलो है। और गर्मियों के सीजन में या फिर मिड ऑफ एनी ईयर में, जून जुलाई में, शैलो पैन को अगर आप देखें या शैलो वाटर सरफेस को आप देखें तो साइक्लोन का बनने का फिनोमिना ये होता है कि जितना पानी गर्म होता है वो नीचे का पानी ठंडा ऊपर आ जाता है और वो साइक्लोन को बनने से रोक लेता है। बट अगर आपका पानी गहरा नहीं होगा तो साइक्लोन जल्दी बन जाएगा। जो वरिंग फैक्टर है वो ये है, बे ऑफ बंगाल के कंपैरिजन में अगर आप देखें अरेबियन सी को तो 100 साल का रिकॉर्ड ये हमारे पास अवेलेबल है इंडियन मेट्रोलॉजिकल डिपार्टमेंट के पास। अरेबियन सी में साइक्लोन बनने की फ्रीक्वेंसी बहुत कम होती थी, जबकि पिछले 1 दशक में या 2 दशक में या 1.5 दशक में हम कह सकते हैं कि कंपैरेटिवली टू बे ऑफ बंगाल अरेबियन सी में भी साइक्लोन बनने की फ्रीक्वेंसी और साइक्लोन आने की फ्रीक्वेंसी बहुत ज्यादा हो गई है। और ये हमारी कोस्टल सिटीज को, मुंबई है, गुजरात की सिटीज हैं, हमारे फाइनेंशियल सेंटर है, कोच्चि है, इन सबको इफेक्ट करता है साइक्लोन रिस्पांस और साइक्लोन इवैक्यूएशन। इसका इकोनॉमिक वैल्यू भी होता है, इसका एक लाइव वैल्यू भी होता है। लास्ट पॉइंट इस स्लाइड पे है कि cities are not only cities does not only generate economic value, they are also major consumers of most of the resources. सिर्फ 2% अगर सिटीज हमारी अर्थ सरफेस पे जो सरफेस का एरिया लेती हैं, 78% या 80% के करीब सिटीज जो हैं वो एनर्जी की खपत करती हैं और अराउंड 60% ऑफ GHG एमिशन, ग्रीन हाउस गैस एमिशन सिटीज के थ्रू होती है। ये अगली स्लाइड थोड़ा सा पर्सपेक्टिव बिल्ड करने के लिए है, जो कि मैंने पहले ही बता दिया कि अर्बनाइजेशन और जैसे जैसे अर्बन ग्रोथ हो रही है वो इतनी मेसी क्यों है, क्योंकि हमारी मोस्ट ऑफ द सिटीज, जैसे आप इस मैप पे देख सकते हैं, ये UN काउंसिल का मैप है। इसमें मैं चाहता तो एक अलग से स्क्रॉल डाउन करके आप लोगों को मैप दिखा सकता था, बट दिस इज जस्ट टू शो पिक्टोरियली के 2030 में आप देख सकते हैं जो जितने भी ब्लू डॉट्स हैं, अगर आप 2030 और 2018 को कंपेयर करेंगे ऑनलाइन जाके, इसका लिंक मैंने इस मैप में डाला हुआ है, 1 मिलियन टू 5 मिलियन प्लस सिटीज साउथ एशिया में और ग्लोबल साउथ में कंपेयर टू 2018-2030 में बहुत ज्यादा होने वाली है। तो आप मैप पे भी ये बड़ी क्लियरली देख सकते हैं, ग्लोबल साउथ में, चाइना में, साउथ ईस्ट एशिया में, साउथ एशिया में डेंसिटी ऑफ टायर 2 एंड टायर 3 सिटीज कंपेयर टू मेट्रो, जिस हिसाब से अर्बन पॉपुलेशन की ग्रोथ मेट्रो सिटीज में बढ़ने वाली है, टायर 2 और टायर 3 सिटीज उससे ज्यादा तेजी से और उससे ज्यादा मात्रा में बढ़ने वाली है। इससे होगा क्या, ये होगा कैसे? माइग्रेशन होगा रूरल से अर्बन एरियाज में, जो कि अभी भी हो रहा है। स्लम पॉपुलेशन जो है, जो हमारी सिटीज में आज का ये फैक्ट है, अराउंड इंडिया में 17% ऑफ अर्बन पॉपुलेशन हमारी स्लम्स में रहती है। पॉवर्टी लाइन के नीचे 9 से 10% मिनिमम $2 पर डे से नीचे हमारी पॉपुलेशन रहती है अर्बन एरियाज में। और ये मैंने आपको बता ही दिया है कि सेकेंडरी सिटीज, टायर 2 और टायर 3 सिटीज की जो ग्रोथ रेट है और जो क्वांटिटी है वो बढ़ने वाली है। ये कुछ ट्रेंड्स अगेन है, इंडिया की अर्बनाइजेशन ट्रेंड है। आप देख सकते हैं जो लेफ्ट हैंड वाला ग्राफ है उसमें जो हरी लाइन है वो पॉपुलेशन है रूरल एरियाज में, और जो लाल रेखा है वो पॉपुलेशन है अर्बन एरियाज में। आप देख सकते हैं 2030-2032 के आसपास ये दोनों मीट कर रही है। दैट मीन्स 50-50 प्रोपोर्शन इंडिया के हिसाब से अर्बन एरियाज में और रूरल एरियाज में 50-50% पॉपुलेशन 2030-31 या 32 के अराउंड हो जाएगी। आई थिंक मेरे हिसाब से रफली अराउंड 43-44% ऑफ India's population right now stays in urban areas, और 2030-32 के अराउंड ये 50-50 हो जाएगी, और उसके बाद अर्बन एरियाज की पॉपुलेशन बढ़ती रहेगी। अगर आप सिटीज के साइज के हिसाब से देखें तो आप देख सकते हैं 1990 में सिर्फ 2 ऐसी सिटीज थी जहां 10 मिलियन से ज्यादा लोग रहते थे भारत में। सिर्फ 2 ऐसी सिटीज थी जिसमें 5 मिलियन या 10 मिलियन के बीच में लोग रहते थे। 2018 में कंपेयर करें 5 ऐसी सिटीज हैं, दिल्ली, मुंबई, चेन्नई, बैंगलोर और वन मोर आई थिंक अहमदाबाद, जहां 10 मिलियन से ज्यादा लोग रहते हैं। 4 ऐसी सिटीज है जहां 5 से 10 मिलियन के लोग रहते हैं, और 7 ऐसी सिटीज 2030 में हो जाएंगी जहां 10 मिलियन से ज्यादा लोग 10 मिलियन मतलब 1 करोड़ से ज्यादा लोग की रिहाइश होने वाली है। उसके कॉन्ट्रास्ट में अगर आप देखिए जो बैंगनी कलर का जो आपका चार्ट है उसमें 1 से 5 मिलियन यानी कि 10 से 50 लाख की पॉपुलेशन वाली सिटीज की आप रेशियो देखिए। 1990 में ये 20 सिटीज थी, अब 2018 में 52 है, और 2030 में 62 ऐसी सिटीज हो जाएंगी जहां 10 से 50 लाख की पॉपुलेशन वाले लोग भारत में रहेंगे। ग्लोबल लेवल पे अगर हम देखें, अरविंद प्लीज आप मुझे भी बता। ओके,
3 मिनट के हिसाब से प्लीज आप।
ओके, सो आई जस्ट ट्राई टू समराइज एज सून एज पॉसिबल। अगर आप ग्लोबल प्रोजेक्शंस और ग्लोबल साइंटिफिक कम्युनिटीज के हिसाब से देखें तो आईपीसीसी की एक रिपोर्ट आई थी सन 2022 में, पिछले साल, जिसमें कहा गया था कि भारत को और भारत के शहरों को सबसे ज्यादा खतरा क्यों है। वो इसलिए है क्योंकि हमारे यहाँ जो इनफॉर्मल वर्कर्स की जो रेशो है, आई एम सॉरी, इनफॉर्मल वर्कर्स की जो रेशो है साउथ एशिया में, वो सबसे ज्यादा है विश्व में, इवन हायर देन सब सहारन अफ्रीका। सब सहारन अफ्रीका में 66% ऑफ वर्कर्स आर इन इनफॉर्मल स्पेस, साउथ एशिया में ये 82% है। स्लम ड्वेलर्स सब सहारन अफ्रीका के बाद साउथ एशिया और इंडियन सब कॉन्टिनेंट दूसरे स्थान पर है। 30% ऑफ हमारी अर्बन पॉपुलेशन यूएन हैबिटेट 2020 के हिसाब से स्लम ड्वेलर्स है। ये हाई कॉन्फिडेंस से आईपीसीसी ने कहा था कि अर्बन एरियाज और सिटीज में लोगों के पास लोगों के एसेट्स पे और उनकी लाइफ को भी खतरा है, ये हाई कॉन्फिडेंस से कहा गया था। और प्रोजेक्शंस हैं, बहुत सारे वैज्ञानिक और वैज्ञानिक रिपोर्ट्स ने प्रोजेक्शंस किए हैं। आई विल क्विकली स्किप all these charts. These were all meant to give a perspective. I'll just give the most relevant one. अगर आप लोग ये चार्ट देख पा रहे हैं, आई एम वेरी सॉरी, these could not be very clear. इसमें अगर आप हरा बार देखें तो दिस हरा बार डिनोट्स डेथ ड्यू टू अंडर न्यूट्रिशन, और अगर आप लाल बार देखेंगे these denote death due to heat stress. आप देखिए ये दो जो बार हैं ये कंपैरिजन है सन 2030 का और 2050 का। साउथ एशिया में आप देख सकते हैं जहां की आज 2030 में अंडर न्यूट्रिशन की वजह से हमारे खित्ते में सबसे ज्यादा डेथ की रेशो होने वाली है, वहां 2050 आते आते हीट स्ट्रेस की वजह से सबसे ज्यादा मौत का आंकड़ा बढ़ने वाला है। सो दिस गिव्स यू द पर्सपेक्टिव हाउ क्लाइमेट चेंज इज गोइंग टू इम्पैक्ट the mortality rate, how climate change is going to affect the overall livability in our cities. आखिरी मिनट लूंगा just to give the broader perspective. हालांकि गौरव सर ने और तिकेंद्र सर ने बहुत अच्छा पर्सपेक्टिव बजट पे ऑलरेडी दे दिया है। इस साल के बजट में कुछ एलोकेशंस हैं जो कि आर आई कैचर्स, कुछ हमेशा की तरह this government has given some really innovative names, some innovative mechanisms also been tried to propose to give the right impetus to certain sectors, but then there are large gapping areas which needs to be filled in. I'm sorry, I'm just shuffling between English and Hindi. जैसा कि तिकेंद्र सर ने और गौरव सर ने बताया, म्यूनिसिपल बॉन्ड्स एक एरिया है जिसके थ्रू क्रेडिट वर्दीनेस ऑफ म्यूनिसिपल बॉडीज को एनहांस करने के लिए और इंटरनेशनल मार्केट से पैसा उगाने के लिए एक एलोकेशन किया गया है, एक प्रपोजल दिया गया है इस बजट में। उसके अलावा इस बजट में एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन के पर्सपेक्टिव से कुछ एलोकेशंस की गई हैं। फॉर एन एग्जांपल 3500 करोड़ रुपए एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन, जिसमें स्पेसिफिकली लद्दाख में सोलर पावर इवैक्यूएशन के लिए कुछ एलोकेशन की गई है। ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन मिशन के लिए कुछ एलोकेशन की गई है। बैटरी स्टोरेज के लिए एलोकेशन की गई है, वायबिलिटी गैप फंडिंग के लिए। एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन पर्सपेक्टिव से अगर देखें और सिटीज के और क्लाइमेट चेंज के पर्सपेक्टिव से अगर देखें तो आई थिंक वी विल वेलकम दीज काइंड ऑफ अनाउंसमेंट, but despite of welcoming, we say much more needs to be done. और वो क्यों? क्योंकि आप एलोकेशंस करके ही पूरा काम खत्म नहीं कर सकते। ऑफ कोर्स देयर आर गैप्स। फॉर एन एग्जांपल, अर्बन सेंटर्स की या अर्बन डेवलपमेंट बॉडीज की कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग एक क्रूशियल मुद्दा है। फाइनेंशियल ऑटोनॉमी ऑफ लोकल बॉडीज, यहाँ म्यूनिसिपल बॉन्ड्स की बात गई है, प्रपोजल गया है। जब तक आप म्यूनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन को फाइनेंशियल ऑटोनॉमी और डिसीजन मेकिंग की ऑटोनॉमी नहीं देंगे, म्यूनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशंस की क्रेडिट वर्दीनेस बढ़ने नहीं वाली। और उनका बॉन्ड का जो अभी एक पार्टिसिपेंट ने भी सवाल पूछा, उनके बॉन्ड की वैल्यू दिन पर दिन उतनी हाई नहीं रहने वाली। ये एक बहुत बड़ा फ्यूचर के लिए रिस्क है, जैसा गौरव सर ने कहा। मिसिंग द पर्सपेक्टिव ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज एडेप्टेशन, रिजिलियंस और सोशल जस्टिस के पर्सपेक्टिव से अर्बन पुअर के हिसाब से इसमें बहुत कम है। जैसा गौरव सर ने कहा कि वी नीड हाउसिंग एंड रेंटिंग स्कीम्स फॉर अर्बन पुअर, क्योंकि घर खरीदना और एक घर ओन करना, स्पेशली फॉर पीपल दोज हु आर वर्किंग एंड माइग्रेटिंग फॉर इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर्स, वो बहुत जरूरी है। कुछ अच्छे एलोकेशन भी है अर्बन पुअर के पर्सपेक्टिव से। फॉर एन एग्जांपल, पीएम गरीब कल्याण योजना, पीएम आवास योजना, जिसका एलोकेशन बढ़ा है और जिसको कंटिन्यू किया गया है। बट देन एट द एंड ऑफ इट आई जस्ट वांटेड टू अंडरलाइन, लेट अलोन इन सारी अनाउंसमेंट की एलोकेशन काफी नहीं है। एट द एंड ऑफ द डे वी आल्सो वांट टू मेक श्योर दैट स्टेक होल्डर्स नीड्स टू एड्रेस द इशू ऑफ अर्बन डेवलपमेंट, कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग एंड इनइक्वालिटी। एक हॉलिस्टिक स्टेक होल्डर अप्रोच होनी चाहिए, जिसमें सिविल सोसाइटी के साथ, जिसमें रेजिडेंट्स के साथ, जिसमें इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर फाइनेंसिंग पे एक थ्रू आउट द ईयर एक डायलॉग प्रोसेस होना चाहिए, जिसमें लोगों से समझा जाए कि उनकी एस्पिरेशंस क्या है और सिटीज को उनके हिसाब से बनाया जाए, या फिर सिर्फ गवर्नमेंट के एस्पिरेशंस पे ये इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर फंडिंग की जाए। और इसमें क्लाइमेट चेंज का एंगल और क्लाइमेट लेंस एंगल अर्बन पुअर पर्सपेक्टिव से यूज करना और लगाना बहुत जरूरी है, और कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग करनी भी बहुत जरूरी है। सो हैविंग सेड दैट, I'll just summarize for the moment and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Nakul. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपका. Very interesting points and figures that you have shared. There are also comments, so I'll request our panelists, especially Tikender ji, Gaurav, and also Nakul, to look at the comments as well as a couple of questions that have also come up. Nakul, just to pick from you and then pass it on to pass the mic, the virtual mic, to Nandita ji. Just raising questions that will be useful going forward. Just understanding that we have now proposed urban infrastructure development fund, which is of annual allocation of 10,000 crores, and we know that there are around, I think Tikender ji could confirm that there are already in 2011 census, if we go by that figure, there were already 4,000 odd cities. If you add other towns, it would become 8,000 towns. If you just if a census would ever happen here, we will have a huge number of cities. So are we then talking of 1 crore per city? Because the number of small cities that we have is so much that what is this 10,000 crore going to do in the form of a urban infrastructure development fund? So those are the questions. And then there have been complete misses in the form of climate action plans. There was a mention in the last budget. It doesn't find a mention here. Yet we are promising new promises in the form of life and amendments within that will give rise to a green credit program. Again, we have missed when our Indian cities have become the most polluted or are again recognized as the most polluted. We have completely missed the national clean air clean air program.
Clean air program.
Not even mentioned. जो मुझे पता है, हमारे पार्टिसिपेंट ने कमेंट भी पूछा है, तो मेरी जानकारी के हिसाब से मैंने बता दिया कि इसका जिक्र भी शायद बजट में नहीं हुआ है। तो वो समस्याएं हैं। तो जिन चीजों के बारे में हमने पिछले बजट में बोला उसको कैरी फॉरवर्ड नहीं किया। और ओवरऑल अगर आप एनवायरनमेंट, जो एक सबसे बड़ा मुद्दा है, मसला है, उसको अगर आप देखें, उसका एलोकेशन 3000 कितना करोड़ है in terms of 3000 crores. Am I getting the figure right? Yeah, I'm getting the figure right. It's 3000 crores. So if we are to do net zero and have resilient climate climate action plans, we have to secure our cities, prepare for that. Is 3000 crores going to help us in that direction when we are, facing huge challenges going forward? I don't know where the funds can come from. We might have a tight kitty in that sense, but do we then really look at out of the box innovative approaches to deal with this? Passing on the virtual mic to Nandita, what do you think has been missed? Of course, a lot has been missed for informal workers and others, but also Nandita, what could be done? If we can go in that direction, I think that would be great. Nandita. Over to you, 10 minutes.
Okay. Good evening to everybody. And I'm thankful to IGSS and INHAF for giving me a forum to talk about this. And I'll come down straight away to my job here today, which is to talk from the point of view of marginalized, unorganized workers in urban economy, right, Unni? So here I just wanted to say, since I worked for women unorganized sector, I will start with them. It is not that I'm partial towards not to look at the men who are part of the urban economy and really taking a lot of odds in their lives, but just I want to give certain context today while I'm talking about women, as I worked and I knew a little bit more over there. So I'm starting from that point, but at the later point, I can incorporate entire urban poor in my talk. Okay. So if we are going quickly with a very small sort of contextualize today's talk about this, we have seen reducing trend in case of urban women work. Of course, total women workforce participation that has gone down to abysmally low of 25%. And COVID has again given a big blow. We found it out that 47% of the women lost their jobs, opposite to only 7% of men who lost their jobs because of COVID pandemic. Another very important statistical point that I would like to bring forth before today's August audience is that that as many of my colleagues here have talked about eStrom portal, if we will look at it until now, the registration out of total registration, 52.84% are women out of total registration that had happened from the unorganized sectors who are women. Now, giving this as a background, let me talk about the generally that we have seen the problems in case of urban poor is very much known to all of us, the people who are working in development sector for a longer period. It's the low pay, income volatility, lack of social safety net, no child care services that's really plagued the urban poor women to take part into job sectors. And of course, there are no benchmark also to monitor the working conditions, no paid leave, no conceptualization of a rigid sort of explanation on minimum wages, and there's rampant illegal practices which are going on with the minimum wages. Generally speaking, ये हम बता सकते हैं कि जो शहरी क्षेत्र में औरतें काम करते हैं, अनऑर्गेनाइज असंगठित क्षेत्र में, वो हमेशा ये सब इनइक्वालिटी का जो दौर तरीके है उसी के अंदर घुस जाते हैं, और उसमें से उनको बाहर लाना बहुत ही मुश्किल होता है, क्योंकि ये सबके लिए एक पूरा वातावरण बन गया है, और उससे उबार के उनका काम करने का जो जिंदगी जीती है वो उसी में उसका जिंदगी निकल पड़ती है, खत्म हो जाती है। एक कोई हमारे कलीग कभी एक धारावी में एक रिसर्च स्टडी किए थे, उसमें देखा गया था कि अर्बन असंगठित क्षेत्र में जो लोगों को जिंदगी का दौर होता है वो 39 इयर्स में सीमित हो जाती है, यानी कि उसका लाइफ इज ओनली लिमिटेड अप टू 39 ईयर ऑफ देयर लाइव्स। सो आपने ये समझ रहे हैं, उसमें हम जेंडर सेग्रीगेटेड डेटा नहीं मिला हमको, लेकिन आप समझ लीजिए कि वो अपने जिंदगी में 2 टाइम के खाना जुटाने के लिए उनके पूरे जिंदगी वो 35 साल के ऊपर 39 साल में ही वो खत्म हो जाती है। और ये डेटा है 2010-12 का, मुझे जेंडर सेग्रीगेटेड डेटा नहीं मिला, तो इसमें हम औरतों का कितना होता है वो मैं नहीं बता सकती हूँ आपको, बट ये जरूर बता सकती हूँ कि उनके जिंदगी का जो हिस्सा चलते रहते हैं, जो रुवाया चलते रहते हैं, वो बहुत कठिन है। नाउ ये सब बात करने के बाद आई विल टेक यू टू द करंट initiative that government is taking of its present condition. Of course, मेरा बहुत सारे कलीग ने ई-श्रम पोर्टल के बारे में बहुत ही बात किया है। इसमें जो नेशनल डेटाबेस तैयार करने का जो प्रयास लिया गया अनऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर के लिए, ये बहुत ही एक प्रशंसा के योग्य है। इट इज रियली प्रेजवर्दी, बट इन दैट केस हियर वी आर फाइंडिंग दैट इट इज उनके जो बेनिफिट्स होते हैं, उसके जो इंश्योरेंस के जो बेनिफिट्स होते हैं वो लोगों के पास नहीं पहुंच पा रहे हैं। और उसके ऊपर हमारे और एक भी जो हमारे शहरी क्षेत्र का जो श्रमिक है, उनके लिए जो श्रम योगी मानधन योजनाएं चालू किया हुआ है, वो भी जो ये पुराने बजट्स में चालू किया हुआ है, और ये एक वॉलंटरी कंट्रीब्यूशन के तौर पे एक पेंशन स्कीम चलाते हैं। They were running this is generally a voluntary pension scheme. Now, this is specifically for the unorganized workers of their age range between 18 to 40 years. Now, इसमें भी इसके चलते भी और एक छोटा सा और सूचनाएं हमें दिया गया था, उसमें और भी बात करना चाहूंगी मैं, वो पीएम स्वनिधि योजना। नाउ वो पीएम स्वनिधि योजना पे जो हमारे शहरी क्षेत्र में हमारे जो स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स हैं, जो हर टाइम एक पूरा माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स और एक पुअर जो हमारे रूरल क्षेत्र से आके अर्बन क्षेत्र में कहीं से भी कैसे भी आके चालू करते हैं अपने जिंदगी, अपना लाइवलीहुड, they are trying to just have a 2 square a meal with that small money. Now let me tell you at present what is happening in Mumbai city. Many of them, it's specifically in Kandivali, out of our research that we are doing right now, we are finding that 6,000 application has been already done, but out of that last 2 years, only 3,000 people have got the 10,000 rupees out of that, while people were giving it back. Some of them are giving it back and now eligible to get 20,000, not a single person had got that. And for entire Mumbai city, we were expected to have 2 lakh street vendors who supposed to get this benefit of PM Swanidhi from earlier budget years or the fiscal years, but that never took place. Now, how many years will a person stand up without having proper food, proper housing, proper place to stay? Now, with this, I would like to take you towards the crisis that is happening. There's a growing crisis in case of rural areas, which accelerated the entire flow of people from rural to urban. Now, in this urban context, when people are reaching over here, urban itself, that urban conditions itself is having limited urban infrastructural facilities being shared by the already existing population. And every day we are receiving a slew of people or the fleet of people joining on the same and trying to share the same facilities. Now, with this, at urban spaces, which has already limited capacity to accommodate the workforce, now, again, what is happening? They are talking about PM Yojana for PM Awas Yojana. Now, in this PM Awas Yojana, this time we are finding that allocation has been already reduced from last fiscal year. Now, the question comes up, while the person is holding a small place of work, which they starting specifically from their residential places. Now, if that residence is not going to be a stable residence for at least 5 to 10 years, then how is it possible that that person, even if you are giving them loan of 10,000 rupees, you are expecting it should be back in certain point of time with certain levels of, I mean, of course, at 8% interest. Now, how will you expect the person to continue their lives if their roof, if their place of stay, which is the workplace also, how will they continue their businesses? Now, there's a big gaps in all these policies, its implementations, and its actual practical implementations. Hence, the lives of unorganized sectors, people, I mean, the people who are working in unorganized sectors are still not receiving the stability, the level of development that has been propagated by the entire budgetary allocation.
Right.
Now, where we should be and how it would be, I mean, as Tikender ji has rightly talked about people's budget, are we preparing that? Are we thinking of it is people's lives? Now, if we are talking about people's lives, the question comes up, who are those people? Is it that the people who are from elite background, who are into the middle class, who are able or capable of putting their intellect as well as putting their physical labor in a different form with a proper professional attitude that they are earning and they're supposed to live in the cities? Why is this negligence to a part of or a conglomeration of citizens who are also supposed to be dealt in an equal manner? Only because they're poor? Is it wrong to be a poor? Now, we are talking about climate change. We are talking about the impact of climates on the cities. We are talking about the extensive capital expenditure and the allotment of money into our budget for the development of the cities. We are talking about the lives, what we are designing or imagining in the year of 2030 or 2040. But what is happening today, 2023? Are our AC locals in Bombay running with full of people? As sometimes ago, Aravind Unni ji has already said that कुछ जगह में metros rent पे लिया जा रहा है बर्थडे पार्टी मनाने के लिए. Then in such condition, in a maximum city of Bombay, do we require number of AC locals to be plied, or we require more general locals, non-AC, with proper sitting arrangement, with a proper ventilation and everything, and with proper safety for the woman as well as and the disabled and the cancer patient and the patient who's supposed to move from one place to another place? What do we require? Of course, we need to give the stress on our henceforth where our country will be into our financial conditions or growth or everything. But is that going to happen without the people, even from the last run? Can we neglect them? Now, if we are going to neglect them,
you have to conclude, let's say, in a minute, maybe.
I'll just take 1 second. So from the very safe place of our drawing rooms, last 2 years, we have seen the way we have treated the unorganized sector people, whose toil made many of the apartments in a polished areas to enjoy the TV in safe places, and saw them walking down the streets alone without food and being treated by their own government by being sprayed disinfectant on their bodies. Is that the way we're supposed to handle our people? Is that the way that we are not going to talk about how their housing does matter? One of my PhD students is working on Lucknow smart cities, and she has found it. The EWS scheme in a gated communities are mostly being given to the people, but those people are reluctant to take hold of those EWS schemes because their place of work or their livelihood, the place where they're supposed to earn their livelihoods, are far away from the place they are given as EWS scheme. Secondly, one more, I think the findings that she has got it, and it's shocking from the point of view of social sustainability point, that I found that the LIG scheme and HIG scheme people are not allowing to utilize the same elevator in their lifts, in their buildings, by these EWS people who's supposed to collect the waste from their homes. Look at the social attitude of us. It's pathetic. So is that the solution that we are trying to find it out from the union budget? With the financial allocations only, without considering people as people? That's the question to this August audience today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandita. Absolutely agreeing to the points that you mentioned, and just a couple of things that come to my mind. I'll share it, and I'll request all of the panelists to kind of think of how do we take it forward. So clearly, right after the first wave, I think in 2021-22 budget, there were many mentions, at least ARHC, contractual agreement for informal workers, and workers was the theme in that sense. Of course, we couldn't forget of what we saw during the first wave of COVID. So worker as a theme was there in that, right? In the last year's budget, there were many mentions of urban interventions, like institutions of national importance to be set up, capacity building for municipal corporation. A lot of initiatives were suggested, and even though we took it with a pinch of salt, but we thought that, I mean, it could probably end up in the right direction. So these have not been followed up, and we have very conveniently forgotten that aspect, that 2 years ago we are still struggling with a lot of after effects of COVID. But the budget and its posturing of the Amrit Kal that we have entered is maybe putting this blind side to the realities that's there on the ground. So now we have gotten a very good understanding of what's happening across. There are many comments that people have put. To some I have already replied, and others I would request people to give comments. Going forward, just checking with Tikender ji, Gaurav and Nakul and Nandita, your closing comments on, look, so we know that this is not the right thing. हम जान रहे हैं कि इसमें काफी कमी है, काफी ठीक है, पॉलिसी लेवल पे शायद मूवमेंट हो रहा होगा, पर पॉलिसी के साथ अगर आप पैसे नहीं अटैच करेंगे उसका कुछ फायदा नहीं है, पहली चीज। पर बहुत जगहों पे पॉलिसी भी पर उल्टी जा रही है, मतलब कि पॉलिसी का रुख ही उल्टे दिशा में है, तो उसको भी शायद कहीं सही करने की जरूरत है। तो हमारा सवाल ये है, आवर क्वेश्चन इज दैट हाउ डू वी एंगेज विद द बजट or the whole process? So if can someone give some sort of a timeline for the creation of this? Point number one. Is there any way that we can engage also? I mean, engagement and spaces for such discussion are also less now, but learning from this, is there any way that we can give ideas to better the union budget, if at all that is possible? Because there are more powerful ideas in the form of $840 billion required to improve our city. So there are bigger ideas, more powerful ideas that are there, but how do we as bunch and people contribute at that, if that's possible? Are there other countries that do this better at this scale? So union budget is different from a city budget. हमारे यहाँ शहरों के बजट पे ही डिस्कशन नहीं होता है, तो यूनियन बजट पे हम डिस्कशन क्या एक्सपेक्ट करें? पर हमारा मकसद ये है कि कहीं ना कहीं शहरों के बजट पे भी काम करेंगे, उसके लिए अलग डिस्कशन होना चाहिए। बट यूनियन बजट जैसी प्रोसेस में क्या कोई और राज्य हैं जहां पर बेटर एंगेजमेंट हुए हैं, या हम डिमांड कर सकते हैं, या हम बात करें इस दिशा में, अगर ये पॉसिबल है तो क्या अगर आप लोग इन मुद्दों पे भी थोड़े आइडियाज देना चाहेंगे और आगे की दिशा दिखाना चाहेंगे? उसके बाद अगर कीर्ति जी कुछ आखिर में बोलें तो इंटरेस्टिंग रहेगा। हमारे साथी अगर any participants want to add comment on the chat box, please do so, and our panelists will take it up. So we'll go via the same route. I think Gaurav can start, then Tikender, then Nakul, and
I think Nandita ji is raising her hand. Let her speak first.
Nandita ji, you want to go first?
Actually speaking, I was thinking, I don't know, it's a wild idea, but do we have anything called social audit continuously being done into the urban areas or urban municipal areas, or making it a point that we are holding those sort of social audit where the people are part of it?
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Interesting point. Yes, Gaurav, if you wish to go.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a little confusing in the sense how we go ahead, because there are multiple layers that are there and multiple things that are happening. So to start with, I think not in this regime, but even before that, around 2000s, we post-liberalization, we saw those even in the UPA 1 when JN and URM came, there were centralizing tendencies, and that's where I think the actual harm was done. Unless that 74th Amendment is implemented in its full letter and spirit, it's not moving ahead. And the second body blow, I think, which is much bigger in the sense, is the implementation of GST, which has merged a lot of local taxes into subsumed local taxes into GST, and then all the revenue now goes to the center. So the corporations, the municipal bodies are looking towards state and center for money, and without money, nothing is moving. So I think that is something which is important. We need to talk about. The other thing that we need to talk about in the larger context about the marginalized, about the urban poor, the unorganized sector workers. I think this debate, and though around 2010 it sort of died, but I think it has revived again, is this debate between public services delivery and privatization. PPPs in terms of private companies getting into public services, and this is why there's so much talk of user charges, because unless the project is what the service is viable, no company is coming in. So privatization versus delivery of public services by municipal corporations, I think that also is a huge debate that we need to push forward if we want to really see a change in that sense. And these are coming back very strongly. So unless that happens, I don't think we'll see much of a change. And with missions like Smart City, I think that's a wholesale privatization of the city. Now the SPV is more powerful than the municipal corporation, so, and garnering all the resources and everything. So I think that is where somewhere we have to start and then see where it goes. So these are my.
मतलब आप कह रहे हैं कि we have to go back, हमको बेसिक्स पे ध्यान देना चाहिए और तो बाकी चीजें देख लेंगे, पहले अपने बेसिक चीजों पे वापस लौटें. म्युनिसिपल गवर्नेंस, उनके हाथ में अधिकार हो, उनके हाथ में आय और उसके अधिकार रहेंगे, तभी वो शायद काफी चीजें कर पाएंगे. थैंक यू गौरव, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. टिकेंदर जी, एनी अदर प्लेस, country that has actually done, I mean country, just to take sort of inspiration if we can, actually done or implemented some of the points that Gaurav has mentioned? How are other cities or countries dealing with this? Not cities, how are other countries dealing with their cities and their urban challenges vis-a-vis budgets?
Well, there are very interesting examples, Aravind, but for example, China presents a different example altogether. You know, while speaking to the mayor of Shanghai, you know, I mean, of course, we should not, and we cannot emulate their models. But yeah, I mean, while speaking with the mayor, so, you know, the city was his domain. I mean, because that was his, I mean, I met him, not her. Most of the mayors are also women mayors there. So Scandinavian countries, for example, where you just part off 30% of the total budget from the center straight away to the cities, another very interesting example. Yeah. So to me, it is, when you say engage, it's more of a disruption now that is required. As Gaurav has rightly pointed out, you know, this over-centralized emphasis in the processes is not the way, is not the way how we have to proceed. So it has to be, even 74th, Gaurav, I would say, is lacking on many aspects. So probably we'll have to strengthen that as well. So more democratization, more decentralization. And but yeah, under the GS, so it's more of a political question, Aravind, now. It's not just, you know, what, so you know, you understand what I'm trying to say. You require a complete political realignment, but are the cities prepared for that? That's a question mark. You know why I say so? Because while reviewing the 74th Constitutional Amendment, KC was the chair and I was also a member of that team. So the two very funny things that I wanted. So first, KC said, you know, Tikender, what is the SPV in a smart city? What is the smart city model? I said, please tell me, sir. He said, it's right, like writing an obituary of the 74th Constitutional Amendment. So you've already written an obituary. Now, how do you just reinvigorate or whatever? So that's one. The second thing is, I mean, all this is happening from us. Who are you and we, Aravind? You are a policy think tank. Gaurav Dwivedi again policy. Kirti Bhai is like, our Bhisham Pitama on urbanization. But where are the city leaders? I mean, when I say the political city leaders, and that's what we figured out in that, and this was pointed out to one of the joint secretary, IAS officer coming from Maharashtra. He said, do you know what the mayor of Bombay wants to become after being the mayor? The person wants to become an MLA in the Maharashtra Assembly. So what you require is a completely different, disruptive kind of intervention, which has to be both bottom top and top bottom. Because I was part of the mayor's council. I mean, I don't find this happening. There's no churning taking place still. Still, because of the processes that we are intertwined in, the cities are more interested to getting, investments and then showcasing it, smart cities, etc., not realizing that. So you understand what I'm saying? So there is no people's movement for that. So we don't find that movement anywhere still. How to build that, how that will happen, I probably am clueless at the moment. But what Gaurav pointed out, this whole binary of the stale debate that was there since long. Why I called Gaurav stale? Because it's long, between the public and private. And that's why I written this article. I'm bringing out that Shimla water story. The whole bunch of ideas that efficiency flows from privatization, from large capital. It's a disaster that has happened in Shimla. So I'll try to exhibit it further once the book comes out. But of course, that article will also be a glaring thing that is going to happen. Massive corruption. I don't know. So if there's an SIT, many people are going to go behind the bars in Shimla if that happens. So the point is, I think even if we engage at that process, Aravind, right now, where, utilities, services, that would be a very major engagement, reclaiming the right of the people on utilities, etc., user fees, user charge. For example, take the latest thing that has happened in Jammu and Kashmir. They've implemented a property tax. I've gone through every detail of that notification, Gaurav. You'll be surprised. It's an anti-constitutional thing. The mandate that is there for the city governments. There's no elected legislature. Urban development is a state subject. So it's the state government that should have taken a decision. And then the values. Can you believe in the values have been decided by the Ministry of Home from New Delhi? So New Delhi decides what will be the property tax in Kulgaon or Badgaon or Pahalgam or Srinagar. It's obnoxious. So, I think even those processes, if we are able to engage, would be. Thirdly, I mean, if you want very prompt, Aravind, I think then we have this bunch of people, the elected member of parliament in that so-called urban standing committee. Probably we can push some of the ideas there, but that will be like very piecemeal, okay? But that can come up in the discussion in parliament. Definitely that can come, because that's the forum where all this is being debated. So yeah, I think that's all that I want to mention. Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you for the provoking points, Tikender. Nakul, comments from your side.
Thank you, Aravind. I think Nandita ji, Tikender sir and Gaurav sir has given us a very good summary of what could be the things that could have been shortlisted or been done in a better way in this budget from social perspective, from governance perspective. I think my point and my agenda would be from climate perspective, and I'll tell you why. We have seen progressively since 2008, when the National Plan on Climate Change was framed, initial plan was framed under the UPA 1 government. And then things have been moving at a steady pace on various fronts. There were national plans, then there was state action plan on climate change, and now we are into a mix of things when even cities specific action plans are there. So for an example, for Ahmedabad and Surat, there are city or heat action plans are there. For Mumbai, there is an action plan, city specific action plan is there. I am sure INHAF is working and preparing to come up with a Chennai specific action plan. Similarly, there are action plans which I have personally also worked in some of the Himalayan states as well. The thing that we as policy and climate practitioners, and even to an extent the development practitioners, have witnessed so far is that we do make a lot of we do a lot of good thinking and planning, but at the end of the day we fail at implementation. For us, yes, the biggest thing is a big tick on the 74th Amendment, giving rights and giving the decision-making powers to the civic bodies where it is much required. That is a big yes from my end. It should be done. And why it should be done? Because these civic bodies, these mayors are the ones, people choosing these mayors are the ones who have to decide what needs to be done for their cities. You need to bring all the departments or the state nodal agency on one table and then frame a plan which can ensure disaster resilience, which can ensure social equity, which can ensure participatory, planning and listening to the grassroots, and then also can evoke and use the right climate lens on what could be the scale of disasters. For an example, a disaster for a coastal city like Mumbai is very, very different from a disaster which we have just seen in Joshimath. All of those areas in the Himalayan city of Joshimath were registered and approved by the government, and still there is so much of disaster that has been happening. So I think from climate perspective, what we need is not only governance, but also capacity building, capacity building not only from decision-making perspective, but also to know what to invest, how to invest, and where to invest. For an example, if the budget says that you are going to raise money or raise the financial credibility of a municipal body through municipal bonds, you can hire n number of consultants, foreign consultants who can, make a very handsome balance sheet for any municipal corporation, show projections that these could be the infrastructure things that will be built, and then this will be the revenue lines, this will be coming in, that will repay the debt. But in practicality, that does not happen, right? In practicality, it's going to enhance the debt burden on the citizens for the future.
Yeah.
So I think that has to be understood well at the municipal level, that capacity building and the decision-making power has to be devolved if we need to take a action at the ground level. And last but not the least, apart from the capacity building, I think I also to an extent oppose the overall economic model. I have also highlighted in my presentation that there will be a sequential, increase in the number of tier 2 and tier 3 cities. I mean, I just want to question, where do we want to go? There will be a time after 40 years that when there will be no rural areas left. There will only be urban areas which will be segregated based on the cost of land, and it will only be a question of the type of services for a society like Greater Kailash in Delhi, where the rate of per square meter is around 5 lakh or 10 lakhs rupees per square meter. The kind of services those people get will be slightly or marginally better than people living in somewhere in Uttam Nagar. I'm just giving example of Delhi. So where does you stop this process or the whole thinking of urbanization driving economy or GDP growth? Somewhere you also have to think in terms of decentralizing the whole economic model to rural or suburban areas also. You have to provide livelihood opportunities. And that's where I think the budget, I'll also underline, this budget not only talks about the city specific initiatives, it has, it talks about a lot of things. For example, renewable energy is there. There are things about, a corridor, a transport corridor is there. Of course, it could have done more in a lot of spaces, but across the economy, changes are required to create livelihood. That's what we require, and along with capacity building. So much more needs to be done, but welcome, but much more needs to be done in terms of practical steps and implementation. So I'll summarize it.
Thank you, Nakul, for the interesting points and focus especially on livelihoods and capacity building. Really appreciate it. So I think we've had a round of discussion. No, I mean, of course, we would never have clear actions or a set way of dealing with such a very complex subject like a union budget. But अगर कुछ दिशा आगे की मिले तो वो ये कि इस पे एक पॉलिटिकल सवाल है. पिछले कई दशकों से जो सोच चलती आई है कि सब ट्रिकल डाउन होगा और ऊपर हम काम करेंगे तो सबको नीचे सबकी तरक्की हो जाएगी, वो क्लियरली हमारे शहरों में या हमारे देश में उतना अच्छा नहीं दिख रहा है. म्युनिसिपल लेवल पे जो डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन या विकेंद्रीकरण होना चाहिए वो नहीं हो रहा है, या जो हमने 74th में सोचा है वही नहीं हो रहा है, तो उससे ज्यादा आगे कैसे होगा? सबसे बड़ा सवाल कि नए जो मसले हैं हमारे सामने, चाहे वो जॉबलेस ग्रोथ हो, कि शायद विकास हो रहा है, जीडीपी बढ़ रहा है, 5 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी होने वाला है, लेकिन लोगों के रोजगार ग्राउंड पे नहीं है, उनकी हालत जैसे थे उससे एक्चुअली बदतर हुई है। तो हम रोजगार छोटे छोटे कैसे और बन सकते हैं, उसके लिए सरकार क्या कर सकती है? जरूरी नहीं है कि सारे बड़ी बड़ी चीजें हों, बड़े बड़े हाईवे हों तो विकास होगा। छोटी चीजों को अगर करना है तो कहीं ना कहीं आपको नगर निकाय, नगर निगम, उनको ताकत आपको देनी होगी, उनको अधिकार आपको देने पड़ेंगे, वरना डिसेंट्रलाइज डेवलपमेंट नहीं होगा। तो शायद हम उस पड़ाव पे आ गए हैं कि अब बताइए कि डेवलपमेंट को अगर नीचे लेके जाना है तो एक नए सिरे से डेवलपमेंट और विकास के परिभाषा को हमें सोचना पड़ेगा। इस दिशा में हमारा डिस्कशन गया है। मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा, तो ये आई थिंक क्लोजिंग कमेंट्स है हमारे लिए, पर कैसे एंगेज करेंगे? गौरव, मैं बस जाते जाते ये कह रहा था कि ये जो फाइनेंशियल ईयर FY 2022-2023 ये वाली चीजें जो है शायद हमको नहीं पता है, क्योंकि बजट भी बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स है। सिर्फ निर्मला सीतारामन जी या हमारे जो फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर, उनके बजट स्पीच नहीं है, उसके अलावा भी there are these documents that are there and exist. So it would be very good for us. I'm just placing it before also Kirti ji and many other people who are here. We can all, I think with people who read budgets better, and with people who work with communities and issues of urban governance, urban poor, workers, there needs to be this exchange that could be set up and to help people read the budgets better. Even though they are meant to be a little not transparent, they sometimes convey the wrong figures, they try to hide things, but I think at least getting to read some of these documents would also help a lot of other people's movements and other organizations also to engage with this process, even if we are to improve the existing frame of things, not change the fundamentals of the budget and financial policies as of now. So those were some ideas that we can work on going forward. गौरव, इस पे आप कुछ बोलना चाहते हैं, क्योंकि आपका माइक खुल गया, फिर मैं
नहीं, बस एक सेंटेंस में, मतलब ऑफ कोर्स वी आर देयर व्हेनेवर यू कॉल, आई थिंक, बट टिकेंद्र जी से बेहतर कोई हो नहीं सकता ये सब बातें गहराई से बताने के लिए और स्पेशली द पॉलिटिक्स। तो बिल्कुल, बाकी आप जब भी कहेंगे हम हाजिर हैं।
जी जी, बस हम सब लोग उसमें साथ में शामिल हो सकते हैं। तो आई थिंक मेरी तरफ से इसमें कुछ जोड़ने के लिए नहीं है, तो आई विल रिक्वेस्ट कीर्ति जी टू maybe close it and yeah, conclude the webinar.
Thank you, Aravind. I think it's very interesting. I don't want to take much time, but I think just take 2 or 3 minutes to make 4, 5, 6 points that I think needed to be added to what was going on. One was this that Gaurav Saab brought out, and also Tikender Saab brought out. They're talking about 30% of the budget, on metro. I think there was a great need to look at the bus. And the whole idea of a bus, 50 buses per lakh people, is a tremendous, I think, idea. And it's very doable. As a matter of fact, I came across a very interesting statistics, that Partho sent me last month when we were doing a workshop on BRTS in Ahmedabad, where he said that, it's absolutely possible to kind of have 100% subsidized bus system in our cities. Is absolutely viable. And I think there's a great need to kind of shift this orientation of budget from this high cost and, I think, high energy to the bus. And it's a much bigger idea, but I thought I'd just mention this, in the context of budget. There was a great need for do this. Second thing is, Nakul, it's absolutely important that we start looking at climate change in the context of cities. And even though it sounds a bit childish, I've been toying with this concept of NDCs and CDCs. We have nationally determined commitments. And I'm trying with this whole idea of what about city determined commitments. If cities could get into doing that, you'll be able to give cities an agenda. You'll be able to kind of give people and large sector of people to industry, of business, civil service, I think, into how to do this. And I think if you could really empower cities to develop CDCs, I think it'd be easier to implement and come across and do NDCs. And I think it's an important idea. Nakul, I'm going to come to you at some point of time. I've done some thinking on this, but I think it's very important that we bring city in the center stage in the context of climate change. That's second thing. Third thing is housing, and I think Gaurav Saab, you mentioned this, and of course Tikender ji also. But you see, I think there's a great need to look at Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. I'm a great admirer because there's a large amount of money involved in that. Problem is this: is anyone looking at what is Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana doing to the quality of living in slums? And there's a direct relationship. And I personally think if there was a very determined and an open assessment of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, we'll soon find out there's a great need to emphasize, in situ slum upgradation. It's a completely forgotten thing. No one is talking about. And if you're talking about improving quality of living, that is where the answers lie, honestly. In situ, citywide upgrading of slums. And it's completely disappeared. It's not there, I think, in our budget anywhere. And I think there's a great need. I would personally feel cut down some budget, from PMAY and push that money into that. And I think that's a third thing that I want to make. Fourth thing is a commitment that I want to make. For the last 6 months, Dunu Roy and I think 15 other people we are working on. He doesn't like the word, but I think urban Manrega. We're talking about sustainable urban employment. Without question, its time has come. And I'm suggesting to my colleagues that we should work in such a way that 3 months before the next budget, we should be ready with a design of what it should be. And go and present to all concerned, present it to Sarkar, present it to, I think, MLAs, present it to MPs, so that next year budget does not miss out on this particular idea. And I think it's doable. We have started the process, and I think many more people joining will be. It has to happen. This has to happen. Not only because Manrega has proved its worth, but it's badly needed. And I think, if there's any lessons for the poor and what you do with the cities and poor, then I think COVID and lockdown has taught us a lot. And this is certainly one idea whose time has come. We need to kind of work on that. The fifth very quick point is this, that we are starting, I think next month, a 20 webinar series in this particular thing on urban governance. And the reason is the 74th constitutional amendment. We are now 30th year of 74th amendment. I'm not saying we revive and bring back 74th constitutional amendment, because times have changed. Cities are no longer the same. And 74th amendment has some very brilliant ideas, but they also need to change. But we got to use that opportunity to rethink the whole entire governance system. So far cities are concerned. And I think, and therefore those series of 20 webinars we're planning would look into urban governance, urban planning, and civic engagement. And I think it's a concrete platform that I'm talking about. Even though Tikender Saab, pulls my leg, I am pushing for last 2 years vigorously 2 ideas. National Commission on Urbanization 2 and State Commission on Urbanization. I think so far cities are concerned, it's a matter of ideas, is a matter of new approaches, new strategies, new solutions. And we should never forget what Valiandau Habitat 2 Secretary said. He said, unless you have revolution in urban problem solving, you're not going to go very far. This, the way we going about doing it, smart cities and PMAs are fine. They're not going to deliver a good, livable, inclusive cities. And therefore, I personally believe in pushing very hard, unsuccessfully. As my proposal lies with 5 state governments, and of course, the national government for the last 2 years. Even yesterday, I'm going to Chennai day after tomorrow to talk about this. But I think, I think it's and when you talk about, say, one of the advantages of National Commission on Urbanization, people do not know that even though it was initiative of the national government, National Commission on Urbanization constituted of people outside the government. There were 10 members and all of them were outsiders. And therefore you're talking about civil society playing a big role. And I think that idea is very important. And we got to kind of look at that in terms of how do we take it further. And 2 small little kind of thing is this, that and it partly approved and partly covered in what I talked about. But jobless growth is a huge problem. Understanding linkages with the rural and urbanization is extremely important. And we are completely in silos mentality. We are just not talking this connection at all. You won't believe me, for 2 years, I'm trying to organize 2 webinars on rural linkages with cities and urbanization. I'm not able to organize one. 2 years. Constant effort. I'm not able to find people who will want to do that. And I think that reflects, in terms of how relegated that important idea is. Because if you're talking about 870 million people in 2050, 30 more years, are we ready? Are we equipped? Obvious answer is we are not equipped. We are not ready. And therefore, you've got to think fast. We don't really have the time. And we have got to look at our villages. We've got to look at our smaller cities. I will look at the rural hinterland and jobs and opportunities and investment and all that goes along with it. So that's the next point that I was talking about. And the small little things that we've been trying to push Tikender Saab, saying in the parliament we require a small little kind of group which understands cities. And in fact, I wrote to Varun Gandhi last week. He has done this book on cities, and I wrote to him that why don't you take an initiative and put together 10 good parliamentarians who will meet people like us every 2 months, see what our issues are, what ideas we have, and can take them to government or to you do whatever you want to kind of do, but basically do that. And I think we've got to kind of develop those kind of linkages. So these are some very, very quick reflections on what I was hearing. Thank you very much. Is Ujjwala there to thank officially everyone? Ujjwala, are you there?
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for giving your time and speaking about the union budget. I think it's very important to understand the nitty-gritties of it and also the way ahead. There are lots of problems and issues which come out, and I mean, the union budget obviously overlooks a lot of the issues plaguing our cities currently. I would like to say that the recording of the webinar will be uploaded to both our YouTube channel and the INHAF website. I have shared the link in the chat. I will once again, maybe I can share the link with all the attendees as well. It's available on our website. I will also be sharing with all the speakers and panelists a summary note of our discussion today, so that we have a list of all the things we have spoken about, and we can share that widely as well. Once again, thank you very much for being here.
Before we end, just sorry, I think in a half a minute.
Mhm.
I think, is it possible for us to kind of think about a small little group, or whatever we want to call it, I think, who essentially decide for itself that it will generate ideas for the entire urban sector for the budget next year, and start working on it. I think this is what Aravind suggested, and this is what also, and then you also pass the buck on to Tikender ji. And of course, Tikender sahab always is there. Is this something that's doable?
Yes, I think, yeah, it's doable.
Huh?
Yeah.
So I
Yes,
think
definitely.
let's think about this, and I'll write a small little note to you, Gaurav sahab. मुझे आप आपका email address भेज दीजिए. Oh no, we have it. Which will I have it? I'll write you a small note. I think let's get this going, because next budget is 12 months, and it's not.
But remember, Kirti bhai, the next budget is going to be not the full budget of the.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can definitely push it.
Elections are there.
So whatever you say, that may be incorporated in the budget.
We also could play safe. If the next budget is not the real budget, next year, we could pick up one or two state governments, which are going to be there, I think, of the next, because I personally think preparing state governments to manage urbanization in cities better is a much greater challenge, and it's a very important challenge, and it's a very different kind of decentralization. And while working on the National Commission on Urbanization, I realized time has come for the State Commission on Urbanization much more than the National Commission on Urbanization. And I think, therefore, I think if national budget is far, can we pick up one or two state governments and really kind of apply ourselves and put something which is solid, that these are the 15 things which are required to go into your budget in the context of cities and urbanization. Gaurav sahab?
Yes, completely. I am on board. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
for the
you
idea,
very
Kirti.
much.
Okay, appreciate
Nakul,
it.
I'm going to call you tomorrow.
Thank you, sir. Sure.